This morning I want to speak about Islam, and it seems appropriate to start with a story that comes from the Sufi tradition about a character known as Nasruddin, who is a mullah or a teacher, but also known as kind of a holy fool or a trickster or the wise fool. And I need your help to tell this story. You'll know the part. So one day the people come to Nasruddin and say, "We want you to preach a sermon for us in the mosque," and he agrees to do so, and he goes to the mosque and he stands up before the people, and the first thing he says is, "Do you have any idea what I'm about to say?" And the people say, "No." And he says, "Well, if you have no idea what I'm going to say, clearly you're not ready for what I have to say." And he walks out of the mosque. Well, that is, the people still wanted to hear him preach, so they went and they said, "Please come back, give us a second chance. Please come back." And so he does. He comes back and he stands before the people and he says, "Do you have any idea what I'm about to say?" And this time they say yes. And he says, "Well, if you already know what I have to say, then it doesn't make any sense." And he walks out the door and they start to scratch their head and they're trying to figure out how they can get a sermon out of this guy. And finally they come up with a plan. So they invite him back and he comes up and he says, once again, the first thing he says, "Do you have any idea what I'm going to say?" And this time half of them say, "Yes." That's your part. Yes. And the other half say, "No." He says, "That's wonderful. Those of you who know, please explain it to the rest." And he walked out the door. Well, this morning I want to preach a sermon, and just to be safe, I'm not going to assume you know or don't know what I'm about to say. This morning I want to speak about liberal Islam and conservative America. Islam is the second largest religion in the world, and yet it may easily be the most misunderstood and maligned. Cable news commentators equate Islam with terrorism. Conservative preacher Franklin Graham has called Islam an evil and wicked religion, and our current president campaigned on the promise of a Muslim ban in immigration. There is a clear and consistent message coming from the leaders of conservative America that there is something about Islam that is fundamentally un-American. However, if you've ever been to Arlington Cemetery in Washington, D.C., or the East Tennessee Veterans Cemetery here in our own area, you will see among the graves of fallen soldiers and veterans that there are not only crosses, the symbol of Christianity, or stars of David, the symbols of Judaism, but the star and crescent, the symbol of Islam. And if on this Memorial Day you make a decision to take a pilgrimage to the East Tennessee Veterans Memorial and you go via Grand Avenue, then you will pass the mosque on your way to that monument. And when you stand before that monument, you will see four values for which we aspire to live as a nation, the four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Our founding fathers were not Islamophobic. George Washington negotiated the Treaty on Tripoli, which was later signed by John Adams, and I will read the language of that document. It's kind of antiquated, but just so you know, it's coming not from me, but from our founding fathers. As the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character or enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims, and as the states never have entered into any war or act of hostility against a Mohammedan nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between our two countries. Now, Thomas Jefferson studied Islam, and when Keith Ellison became the first Muslim congressman elected from the state of Minnesota in 2007, he took his oath of office with his hand resting on Thomas Jefferson's Quran. Benjamin Franklin helped fund a public house where traveling preachers could come preach, and he said everyone was welcome, including if someone came from the Middle East and wanted to preach Islam, they would also be welcome in the pulpit. So this morning I want to speak about liberal Islam and conservative America. The problem with the liberal Muslim tradition is it does not make the headlines. Terrorists, hijackers, suicide bombers, and mass shooters dominate the news feed. The reformers, the human rights activists, the progressives, the healers, the peacemakers, the humanitarians, the scientists do not get equal time. This morning I want to speak about liberal Islam and the liberal Muslims who defy those stereotypes perpetuated by the media, who may be our best hope for peace in the world. Liberal Muslims who speak out for democracy and against tyranny, who speak up for peace and against terrorism, who speak up for moderation and against extremism. Now, my interest in liberal Islam is not academic. It's actually very personal. When I was a young student at the University of Tennessee, I had a friend named Kaheen Nasir who is from Somalia, and he may be the first universalist I ever met. I remember we would have these long philosophical conversations, and I remember one time he said, "Chris, I've been all over the world," and he had been grew up in Somalia but lived in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and India as well as the United States. He said, "I've been in churches, I've been in mosques, I've been in temples, I've been in synagogues, and in every single one I've felt a holy presence." He's a very universalist person. Many years later, I would come across a poem, an ancient poem by Ibn Arabi of the Sufi Muslim tradition that seemed to be saying the exact same thing Kaheen was saying to me. He wrote, "My heart has opened unto every form. It is a pasture for gazelles, a cloister for Christian monks, a temple for idols, the Kaaba of the pilgrim, the tablets of the Torah, and the book of the Quran. I practice the religion of love, whatsoever directions its caravans advance. The religion of love shall be my religion and my faith." Now recently, Dr. Amadou Saul and I, who've known each other for many years, we were students together at University of Tennessee. We were at the rally on UT campus that was organized in support of the Parkland high school students who are organizing for responsible gun control legislation in our country, the March for Our Lives. And as we were gathering at that rally, I couldn't help but remember that about 30 years ago, we had been the young people that were organizing the rallies on campus. At that time, there was a shanty town that we built to raise awareness about apartheid in South Africa, encouraging U.S. corporations and the University of Tennessee to divest from apartheid in South Africa. So the religion of love takes many different manifestations from decade to decade. This is the religion of love, and it's a religion that people of all faiths can practice. Many years ago, I took our youth group to visit the mosque, and we met with their youth group, and there was a question and answer session there that the kids could ask each other questions. This was probably also about 20 years ago, but the answer that a woman gave to one of our kids' questions stays with me. One of our kids asked, "Do Muslims believe that God is a man or male?" And the woman who answered was a teenage girl, and she said, "In our tradition, we believe that whatever you think God is the opposite." And once you've imagined the opposite, then you need to imagine the opposite of that. And that process continues to go on and on. In other words, God is bigger than our images, bigger than our ideas, bigger than any thought picture we can put in our heads. As soon as we get an idea in our head, we need to erase it. It strikes me that this is another way of saying God is a fresh beginning. God is a new start. God is a clean slate. During Ramadan, Muslims fast during daylight. But at sunset, the mosque serves a meal, and so you can eat before sunrise and after sunset. And what you may not know is that if anybody who walks into the mosque after sunset is welcome to food, the homeless, anyone who comes in the door is welcome to a meal. This is one of the ways that Islam works for freedom from want. A world, that's part of the fasting, is to remind ourselves that there are hungry people in the world, and then to make resources available for more people. As I was sharing a meal in the mosque, I ran into another person. It was the first time we met, but he was also a world traveler, and he said to me, when I come to the mosque, I come simply to pray, and not necessarily to Allah, just simply to pray. In other words, prayer is bigger than any one word or any one religion. According to Muslim tradition, there are at least 99 names for God, including the compassionate, the merciful, the forgiver, the most high, the loving one, the light, the guide, the patient one. Muslims pray 5 times a day, and one of the purposes of the prayer is humility. I'm reminded of a friend of mine who was an atheist who used to go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and there's a lot of, I asked him how he felt about going to those meetings when there was a lot of talk about finding a God of your own understanding or a higher power of your own understanding, and he said, Chris, AA doesn't require me to believe in God. AA requires me to know that I'm not God. And that's a similar dimension to the discipline of prayer 5 times a day, is to 5 times acknowledge, I'm not God. I'm not the one. Cultivating humility is not always easy to do in any religion. And every time I hear, like Franklin Graham call Islam a wicked religion, or hear a politician say we need a Muslim ban, what I hear is the absence of humility. Cultivating humility is not always an easy thing to do. There is a story also told about Nasruddin. Nasruddin is called by a great emperor, and the emperor says to him, Mullah, teacher, all the great emperors have honorific titles with the word God in it, like God ordained, or God blessed, or God accepted. Why don't you invent such a title for me? And Nasruddin said, God forbid. So humility is important in every religion. And I often sense a lack of humility among many Americans as they reflect on Islam. Now, when we speak about Islam, we need to point the fact out that 9 Muslim women have served as the heads of state, presidents, or prime ministers of their home countries: Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Mauritius, Kyrgyzstan, Kosovo, Senegal, Indonesia, whereas the United States of America has yet to elect a single woman to be president of the United States. So it may be easier to see the barriers to advancement for women in other countries than it is to see those same barriers present in our own country. For instance, if you go online to the website for the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, one of the largest seminaries serving one of the largest denominations in this country, you will discover that they have many, many faculty. You can scroll down. Not a single one is a woman. Whereas in our hometown, the Taysir Seminary, the Muslim seminary here in town, one of the most prominent faculty members, Zainab Ansari, is a woman, and she is very outspoken. She is 1/4 of the faculty there. I've often heard her say she really reflects a lot of what it means to be a Muslim in a pluralistic world. And I've often heard her say God did not create us all to be the same, to be exactly alike. Diversity is part of the plan. Religious diversity, cultural diversity, racial diversity. It's all part of the plan. In this way, liberal Islam is way ahead of conservative America. Conservative commentators tell us that Islam is un-American, but as my friend Faisal Al-Gudafan says, America is the best place to be Muslim. He says, the best place to be Muslim. And he says, if you meet a Muslim in America, you know they really want to be Muslim because nobody's making them do it, you know. So you meet a Muslim in America, it's a great place to be Muslim. He says, the other thing that's great about being a Muslim in America is the government will never, ever do something stupid in the name of Islam. They may do something stupid, but it won't be in the name of Islam. So in this way, he loves the separation of church and state. He loves it. So when I think of examples of liberal Islam, I could point to global figures, people who have made important advancements in peace negotiations, many different big picture kinds of things, but I don't have to look that far to find a great example. After the mass shooting in the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, a hate crime directed toward the GLBT community, Yasin's Falafel Hut here in downtown Knoxville opened its doors to the GLBT community and fed people free of charge. This act of generosity under tragic circumstances is simply a manifestation of the spirit of that place every day. When you walk through the doors of that falafel hut, you will see a big sign that says, "Welcome all sizes, all colors, all ages, all sexes, all cultures, all types, all religions, all beliefs, all people are safe here." If you've ever met Yasin, you know this to be true. He is a loving and compassionate man with a big heart. He is a Syrian refugee. Why would you want to ban such a person from this country? America needs more people like him. America needs more people with big, compassionate hearts. And so, in conclusion, let me say the news feed focuses on terrorism, and terrorism does exist. It's a real thing. We must continually strive to protect the many who are peaceful from the few who are violent. We must continually strive for a world where there truly is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. When Mohammed El-Barachi, a Muslim, lost his wife in a terrorist attack in Belgium, he wrote an open letter to the world explaining that he planned to meet the jihad of terrorists with a jihad of love. Now, the word jihad means struggle, and the biggest jihad ever in the world for any of us is the jihad against egotism, the struggle against egotism. And so the jihad for love is how he plans to respond. He wrote, "Whenever I meet someone of another faith who allows themselves to be led by love, I have the feeling that we share the same religion. Behind everything that divides and separates us, all the inhabitants of this earth are bound together, black and white, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims, and atheists. It's a great thing to be part of a particular people or a particular religion, but above all, we are a part of humanity. We can lose our culture, we can lose our faith, we can lose our culture and our country, but we must never, ever, ever lose our humanity." In other words, ours is a religion of love in whatsoever directions its caravans may advance. The religion of love must be our religion. That's what I have to say this morning. And now that you know what I have to say, you can go out into the world and share it with those who do not know.